I'm kind of annoyed right now because this is my second time filming this video. The first time, the books were just like out of frame. Nobody knows the struggle of being a booktuber. Anyways, hello, welcome back to my channel. I know most of y'all bitches are gonna call me a hypocrite because in my last video, I did mention that I was no longer going to talk about books on my channel unless I already read them, which means no more TBRs, no more hauls or anything like that. But I found a loophole. Why not just haul the books that I bought this year that I already read? Because believe it or not, this might come as a shocker to some bitches, so just buckle up. Sometimes I read the books that I buy. Yeah, I know. Who would have thought? Very new concept for BookTube. Extremely new concept for BookTube. So yeah, I hauled a lot of books this year. A little bit too much. If you ask me, a little bit too much books this year. But I did read quite a few of the books that I purchased. So today I'm here to talk about those with y'all. The other ones, we ain't gonna talk about them. So I have 10 books here, and about half of them, 5 of them are Caribbean reads because, you know, we support local on this channel, we support regional. So I'm gonna talk about those first, and then I'm gonna get to the rest of the non-Caribbean, just not as good books later. So the first 2 books I talked about in my next wrap-up, which I filmed, but I'm not sure that I uploaded. So either I already talked about these on my channel or I will soon. They are both Peepal Tree books. If you don't know what Peepal Tree is, it's a publisher based in the UK and they publish primarily Caribbean fiction. So I bought a poetry collection. This is called Everyone Knows I Am a Hunting by Shivani Ramlochan, who I actually know personally, and she even signed it for me. I didn't understand half of the poems in here because I'm dumb and I don't get poetry, but I loved Shivani's writing. Her writing style is gorgeous. Her choice of words, the way that she structures her sentences and her stanzas, and that's what you call it, right? Stanzas. It was great. And if you like poetry, especially Caribbean poetry, I highly recommend that you read Everyone Knows I'm a Hunting. I also picked up this book here called Chinese Woman by Janlo Scheinborn. This one takes place in Guyana in the 1960s and the early 2000s, and it's following this guy named Albert Aziz who, because of his race and his religion and ethnicity and disability, he feels kind of like an outcast in his own society. So he has a lot of anger and resentment, and that sort of leads him to becoming involved in a bunch of weird things. This book is weird. I didn't quite know if I liked it or not, but I did do a review of it on my Bookstagram, so I highly recommend that you go check that out if you want to know more of my thoughts on it, as well as just look out for my reviews on both of these books in the next wrap-up. Next up, we have Out on Main Street by Shani Mutu, which is a collection of short stories. This is actually her first book. I didn't really love this as much as I love her other books. Her novels are just so brilliant, so I had really high expectations for this one, but it was kind of a letdown, and I think that that's primarily because it's one of those collections where it's just a bunch of short stories thrown together that aren't necessarily very cohesive. I mean, they all deal with Caribbean identity, Indo-Caribbean identity at the intersection of queerness and Indo-Caribbean womanhood and diasporic identity and all of that kind of stuff. So it was great, but like I just didn't really, none of the stories in here really resonated with me or stuck with me. The only one I really like, and the one that I remember the most, is a row that a Trinidadian woman had with a white man in a parking lot somewhere in Canada. And I enjoyed that. I don't know why I enjoyed that one more than the rest, but even though I didn't love this one, it's not going to deter me from reading more Shani Mutu because, as I said, her novels are brilliant, and even though, again, I didn't love this one, her writing is still amazing. Her prose is excellent, so obviously I will be reading more from this author in the future. Next up, we have 2 books that I got for free. I went to a wine bar, and you're probably thinking, Sajid, why did you go to a wine bar? You don't drink alcohol. Bitch, they had free books. Basically, it's called Dalai Lama. It's located in one Woodbrook Place. I would highly recommend going there if you're from Trinidad. How it works is you carry books to donate and you take books from their shelves, and they have a really good selection. They only take like good books, so if you have like books that are in fairly okay condition to mint condition, you could go and donate those there and then take some new books in return. I went and I donated some books and I got some books out of that. Most of the books I haven't read as yet, but 2 of them I had read previously. The first one is called Anna in Between by Elizabeth Nunez, which I had read a couple of years ago and I really enjoyed out of the library, but I never really got my own copy, and I always wanted my own copy, but every time I come across a copy it's like too expensive because this is one of those books you don't really get your hands on too often. So when I saw a hardcover version of this book for free on the shelf, of course my camera decides to shut off on me while I was in the middle of a sentence, but yeah, I was saying that I got this for free, and I'm really happy to have gotten a book that I had been wanting for a really long time for free. I also just realized that I forgot to say what the damn book was about. So essentially, Anna in Between is just a novel about this woman from Trinidad who had been living in New York for about half her life. She comes back home to Trinidad to visit her family, and the book doesn't really have much of a plot. It's just about her visit home to her family and a little bit of a family secret that her parents have been keeping from her. And it's a story about family. It's a story about Caribbean heritage and history. It's a story about, you know, not really knowing where home is and being an immigrant returning to your home country and feeling like you're living in between two worlds and all that kind of jazz. It was a cute story. It's not a very memorable story, but I did enjoy it. Hence why I probably forgot to, like, you know, tell you all what it was about. The next book that I picked up at Dalai Lama was The Star Side of Bird Hill by Naomi Jackson, which is a book that I already owned a copy of. I already had a paperback of this. When I saw the hardcover, I was like, I kind of want that, and I kind of want to replace my own paperback copy with this because I'm a shallow, materialistic bitch. So I picked up the hardcover and I'm really glad. So whenever I decide to reread this book, I can reread it more comfortably with this big, beautiful copy. Because I did kind of struggle reading this small copy. If you haven't heard of this book as yet, What You Doing With Your Life is really good. It's a story that follows these two sisters from New York, but their mother's from Barbados. She succumbs to depression and decides to send her two daughters back to Barbados to spend the summer of 1989 with their grandmother. And you think from like the first like 50 to 100 pages, so there's gonna be like a really cute, fun read and like summer vacation in the Caribbean or whatever. It ends up turning really dark really quick. Like lots of traumatic things end up happening to these characters, but the book is still so good, and it was still such a fascinating exploration of these two girls and their very complicated lives and their relationship with their mother and their long lost father and their grandmother as well. It was really good, and I highly recommend that you pick it up. It's one of those books people don't talk about too often, but I think deserves a little bit more attention. In fact, all of these Caribbean books that I just talked about, like, they all deserve more attention. Read West Indian authors, please. Y'all could put down Sally Rooney for 2 seconds and pick up a book by a Caribbean author. That would be great. Anyways, moving on to the non-Caribbean books portion of the haul. The first book that I have here is actually part of a collection that I'm working on collecting. It's the Penguin Drop Caps collection. I have quite a few books in the collection thus far, and I am hoping to get all 26. It's basically like these gorgeous hardcover books that all have like a letter on the cover, and each letter represents a letter of the alphabet, and the letter corresponds with the author's last name. So the first book that I got here, my friend gave to me, and this is the book that kind of catalyzed my desire to collect the Drop Caps collection. This is The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. And as you can see, T stands for Tan. So that was the book that they chose for T. And I love The Joy Luck Club. I absolutely love this book. I read it a couple years ago out of the library. Same time I read like Anna in Between out of the library. I read this out of the library as well. And I just loved it. It is a classic. It was published in 1989, I believe. And it is a story about these 8 women, 4 mothers and 4 daughters. The 4 mothers are immigrants from China, and they are living in San Francisco, and the 4 daughters are obviously the daughters of these Chinese immigrant women, and it's about their lives growing up in Chinatown, San Francisco, and it's about the mothers' lives and flashbacks to their lives in China, and it's just a really expansive story that spans the scope of time and, you know, these different 8 women and their different lives. It's a story about family and found family and lost family and finding back your lost family. It was a really, really, really good book. I absolutely loved it, and I do want to read more from Amy Tan. She's definitely one of those authors that I think I need to pay a lot more attention to, because from watching a lot of her interviews about her writing process and stuff, she is the kind of writer that I aspire to be. Like if I write like a fraction of what she does, like if my writing is a fraction of what hers is, then I'll be set for life. I don't even have to publish a book. I would just be totally happy with what I can produce, because I just think that she's such a brilliant author in that regard. Next up, we have The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I actually got this for free from a local independent bookstore, Book Bar TT. They sent this to me in exchange for like reviewing it and giving them a shout out, and I did a whole video talking about whether sexuality should or should not be a spoiler in regards to this book. If you have been living under a rock and you don't know anything about Evelyn Hugo, I don't know what to tell you at this point. It's about this famous Hollywood Hollywood starlet named Evelyn Hugo who rose to fame in the 1950s. She was married 7 times and is known most infamously for that. But the book kind of follows her relationship with the truest love of her life, which was not one of her 7 husbands, but a woman by the name of Celia St. James, who was also a famous actress. Scandalous. Read it. It's great. The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I listened to the audiobook of this year and I really, really loved it. So I wanted my own copy. So I went and I bought my own copy and I just love it. It was such a cute read. The writing is great. The characters, the little romance that we had going on, the little gay romance. It was cute, adorable, highly recommended. Finally, we have a couple nonfiction books, starting off with Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs and Other Questions from Tiny Mortals by Caitlin Doty. This is a compilation of questions that Caitlin has gotten as a mortician from children who ask really weird questions about death. And it's her sort of answering the questions in the scientific and philosophical and other ways that she does as an amazing mortician. I'm obviously a huge fan. I watch Ask a Mortician all the time, which is her YouTube channel, and I've read her 2 previous books as well. And she's just a phenomenal writer and content creator. As I was saying, she's just a phenomenal writer and content creator, and I really enjoy her work, and I've learned so much from her. And this book, I wouldn't say it's as enjoyable as her previous 2 books, which are a lot more deep and a lot more introspective in my opinion. This one is just straight trivia, but it's still so impactful. You still learn a lot, and it's so easy to read. Like, it's only 200 pages long, much less than that if you discount all of like the illustrations in the book. So like, if you want something really, really quick but super impactful that you'll learn a lot from, highly recommend this one. And the final book I have to talk about was a pre-order. This is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green, one of my most anticipated books of the year, and it did not let me down. I love me some John Green. I obviously love all of his YA novels. Well, I don't love them. Some of them I love, some of them I don't like, but he's a person who I just absolutely adore. But I was really impressed by this book. I didn't quite know what to expect because it's his first nonfiction, but it's so good. It's like a collection of essays that reviews random things that exist in our human-centered world, the Anthropocene, if you will, and it's so freaking, like, he reviews the random shit this man talk about in this book. Halley's Comet, Diet Dr. Pepper, Velociraptors, Whispering, Viral Meningitis, Monopoly. Like, he just talks about everything, and he doesn't just talk about these things, but he talks about the wider context, right? So like the impact that these things have had on humanity, the impact that humanity have had on these things, right? As well as their history and what they say about our human-centered world and us as people. And it's just so good. I really, really enjoyed it. This is another book that I wrote a very detailed review for on my Instagram. So if you want to go check that out, you could do that. And I also mentioned it in, previous wrap-ups and whatnot. One of John Green's best things that he's ever done. Highly recommended. Highly, highly recommended. And there we have it. These are all of the, well, not all of the books that I bought this year, but these are some of the books that I bought this year and that I've actually read. Obviously in the comments down below, I'd love to know if you've read any of these books and if you have any thoughts on them. That being said, thank you all ever so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely, lovely day, and until next time, inshallah, keep reading.